Department of Health.
Good morning. My name is Paula Reeves, and I'm our Senior Environmental Planner for the Environmental Public Health Division of Washington State Department of Health. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Paula. Office of Financial Management.
Hi, I'm Eric Hansen. I'm the Senior Budget Assistant to the Governor for Transportation. And yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Eric. The Office of Superintendent for Public Instruction.
Good morning. I'm Patty Embody. I'm the Director of Student Transportation with the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, and I apologize, I'm having problems with my video at the time.
Thanks, Patty. It wouldn't be 2022 if there weren't technical issues with Zoom.
That is true.
Thanks for being here. State Efficiency and Environmental Performance Office.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ian Kinderpile. I am filling in for Hannah Waterstrat, and SEEP is currently overseeing the implementation of Executive Order 2104 on state fleet electrification with a ton of help from Courtney and her team at DES.
Thanks, Ian. The Utilities and Transportation Commission.
Good morning. I'm Jason Lewis. I'm the Legislative Program Director and Tribal Liaison for the UTC. Our role is primarily going to be in the regulation of investor-owned utilities through their electrification of transportation plans, electric vehicle supply equipment, and infrastructure. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Jason. Welcome. Governor's Office.
I'm not sure we have either one of them on right now.
Thanks for that, Stephen. So we've got Anna Leasing and Debbie Driver, who I think will be joining us shortly. Welcome to the first council meeting. It's great to have all of you here. And as Tony said, and Charlie has said, I'm really excited to work with you to get this work accomplished. Stephen, if you'll drop the agenda in the chat, just want to let folks know what we have in store for them today. All right, so there's a couple things there. We're going to spend some time focused on the perspectives that each agency or office has about the council's responsibilities. We've already heard from Chair Leas, and we'll also hear a little bit later on remarks from the House Transportation Chair Phi. We're going to then move into a discussion and take action on the state's NEVI plan. After that, hopefully around 10:45 or 10:25, we'll take a break. After that, we're going to come back and talk about governance issues for the council, like decision-making, advisory groups, how we actually get the work done, and then what the next steps are for the council from here on July 21st, 2022. And if everything goes according to plan and on time, we will adjourn at 12 noon. So what I want to do is invite each of you who just introduce yourselves in reverse order to just say a few words, a couple of minutes about the perspective that you in your role and that your agency brings to this council. And if along the way you could name programs or related work that can be that we can collaborate on here at the Interagency EV Coordinating Council, that would be great. So if we go in reverse alphabetical order by agency, Jason, you would be the first person to talk about your role. You mentioned it a little bit in the opening, but would you say a little bit more about kind of some of those elements that you laid out for us?
Absolutely. And thank you for going in reverse alphabetical order as I was mid-drink of coffee. So, my first role really is going to be one of listening and learning. I think that there's just a lot to be gained from the interaction, and then also from just getting a better understanding of the goals, everyone's perspective, and kind of what's currently in the works. The UTC, a few of the things that could mention really relate to the electrification of transportation plans for our regulated industries. But also because of the UTC's unique I guess, scope of authority, I think that we are able to be a resource as we have discussions on infrastructure, on future outlook and capacity, all the way, quite frankly, all the way down to some of the safety elements. So really see us under the tent as a in that resource role. As it directly relates to some of what we're already doing, probably through our regulated industries and their future planning, and just kind of coordinating some of that planning with the council.
Thanks, Jason. Ian?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So I mentioned Executive Order 2104 on state fleet electrification. And so SEEP's portfolio is basically focused on the state operations and the environmental impact that we all have as part of the work that we do. The governor laid out a series of targets for the state fleet, culminating in 100% electrification for light duty vehicles by 2035. So I think we are having, a lot of different conversations. Senator Elias was talking about the targets that IEVCC is working towards. So I think there's a lot of room for partnership here. I think a lot of the big challenges that we've been facing are related to the EVSE, the infrastructure, the charging infrastructure, and how that really is a bottleneck and a kind of a mental block for people to think about the adoption and usage of EVs. So those are some of the things that we're working on and thinking a lot about right now.
Thanks, Ian. Patty?
Okay, I got it working this time. Yay. Well, I'm like I said, I'm the director of student transportation, so all things school buses. And I agree with Jason. This is going to be a listen and learn time for me also. Electric school buses are new to the state. We have approximately 10,600 school buses in inventory throughout the state. However, 34 of those are electric. We are seeing a little bit of a slowdown in the manufacturing of school buses as a whole, including electric. I see that also that the infrastructure is a problem that for school districts at this time. And I'm here to try to find, to help assist school districts in their journey and to provide information. We do provide all the grant information and forward that onto the school districts so that they can take advantage of the grant opportunities that are out there, both state and federal. Our office also calculates and apportions and allocates the depreciation and replacement payments for school buses to school districts so they can renew their fleet. Bringing in the electric school buses brings in another element to that process. And I'm here to answer any questions and just to take advantage of all the knowledge that's out there.
Great. I look forward to learning with you, Patty. Eric?
Sure. Good morning. So at OFM, as I said, I'm the senior budget assistant to the governor. So as you can tell in the title, budget, I'm the guy that helps formulate budgets, work with agencies when they submit budget requests. And so part of the role of OFM is helping the governor develop his budget and, putting funding behind his goals and the goals of the state. I'm also here to help coordinate because there are many different areas in OFM, as an example, by all the different agencies. So in transportation, commerce is not one of our client agencies, but I work with the SBA that has commerce as part of their portfolio, and Department of Ecology, which is in our natural resources SBA's purview, to kind of bring all that together and hopefully coordinate within OFM all the different areas and where we have funding, understanding that funding and making sure that we help get funding to advance the state's goals and achieve the carbon reduction we have. An example is federal funding that comes through DOT through the National Electric Vehicle Program, recently in the IIJA Act, to advance electric vehicles and infrastructure. So that's what I'm bringing to the table, I think. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Eric. And for those folks who are not in the know, I think an SBA is a senior budget analyst. Did I get that right, Eric?
Yes, senior budget assistant. So a senior budget assistant leads the governor's different teams. So I lead the transportation team. I have a counterpart that leads natural resource team, education. We're broke up by different areas so that we can concentrate on those areas and hopefully add some expertise and knowledge.
I know that's the case. Thanks so much for that explanation. Paula?
Hi, all. Department of Health, as you may know, is responsible for the health disparities mapping work that I hope contributes to this process, and I believe has, and in the future will continue to be hopefully useful to you all, and welcome your input on that. And possibly our environmental justice program manager may be joining you in the future for these discussions with this coordinating committee, as I think that will probably be more of the focus of this moving forward.
Great, thanks, Paula. Dustin?
Yeah, the Department of Ecology, like I mentioned before, is the kind of environmental protection or environmental regulatory agency in the state. Last year, we adopted the zero emission vehicle rules to essentially require manufacturers of new automobiles to sell a certain percentage of those vehicles as zero emission in the state. And that included both light duty and the medium and heavy duty sectors that we adopted last year. This year, we're working on rulemaking to essentially extend that program out to 2035 for the light duty side, at which time it'll require 100% zero emission vehicles. So we're very excited about getting that program in place, and that's relates to our goal of achieving 100% by 2030, which hopefully working through this council will be able to come up with a plan to achieve that earlier than what our regulatory, the rulemaking and regulatory side. Ecology also administers some grant programs, specifically through, or the big one is through the Volkswagen settlement, which was that Volkswagen did about 6 or 7 years ago. So Washington has $141 million in that program, and they've done multiple grants for shore power, EV infrastructure, electric school buses, ferry electrification, all kinds of things. Ecology also administers the Diesel Emission Reduction Act funds, or the DERA funds, which is clean diesel, and that also funds electric school buses. We're also involved in other grant programs through WashDOT and some other agencies. And all of the work we do is focused on equity and environmental justice, essentially trying to reduce transportation pollution in disadvantaged and overburdened communities. That's our focus. So thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dustin. Courtney, what more would you say about the role you and DES play in the space?
Thank you guys so much for having us. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm the program manager for fleet operations. Soon to be joining us come August is going to be Jonathan. He's going to be our EV implementation administrator. Like I mentioned, hiring a full dedicated team to this effort. However, I'm still probably going to be involved and excited to be involved past August 1st as well. So for DES, for those who are unfamiliar, for the state vehicle fleets in Washington, I always oversee it as kind of looking at like 4 big buckets of WSP, Washington State Patrol, Washington DOT, Washington Department of Natural Resources, and DES. So DES, we have over 5,000 state vehicles, and so a lot of the agencies I didn't mention utilize DES for their state vehicle needs. We kind of have a cradle to grave approach. We deal with agencies to over the vehicle acquisition, ensuring all the modifications and upfitting is going to be completed to their specifications and business needs. For the 7 to 10 year life cycle of the vehicles, we oversee all the maintenance and repairs. We have a shop here locally within Thurston County. And then we also deal with all the statewide vendors for repairs. We also then oversee the surplus operation aspect. So we're actively engaged in vehicle electrification and partnering with SEEP on a various different projects. One of which I mentioned earlier is our zero emission vehicle work group, which is once a month, and we're happy to have other people join if you guys want to reach out to me after this call. Currently, we have a lot of the main agencies with large vehicle fleets. For DES, we like to be as involved as possible, I guess you could say, not just in fleet electrification, but we also oversee the enterprise-wide transportation policy. And we also have our contracts and procurement team that helps our master contracts. Currently, we've done a couple things to try to further the vehicle availability for fleet electrification. We have our motor vehicle master contract, and we've also recently been able to flex on our interactive agreement with Sourcewell. So now people can utilize purchasing motor vehicles off of our Sourcewell contract as well as our motor vehicle contract. And and we also recently in our supplemental budget got $2.9 million to put towards EVCC infrastructure at state-owned office facilities. We're going to be hiring a consultant as part of that work to be creating a preliminary report that's going to go to the legislature on EV implementation strategy for agencies, including DES, to move forward with. So we're excited to start that work. And we just recently got $2.6 million of that is maybe going towards 11 different projects statewide for installing infrastructure. So very excited to be part of this journey, and I'm going to try my best not to use the different charged and sparked and fun little EV words throughout this meeting, but I've been on a lot of electric vehicle meetings, and forgive me if I do. So thank you for letting us be a part of this.
Yeah, we couldn't do this without you and the work that DES is doing, Courtney. So thank you for being here, and look forward to collaborating with your new teammate when they join. Brad.
We've been working on this effort for a little over a year now with regards to the rulemaking that the agency was tasked with. And the primary goal of that rulemaking is to help ensure that there's some degree of conformity and accessibility across the different dispensing entities, so that consumers can have confidence that they can get a charge when and where they need it, and that they're getting what they're paying for. It's been a heavy lift for the agency so far because it's a completely novel industry to us. Learning the terminology, the challenges, the players took a lot of work, but I think we're in a pretty good position as having a fairly strong stakeholder base. Rulemaking continues. Once the rules are finalized, I see AG's role is fairly limited in scope, specifically towards just certifying and monitoring dispensing devices. So for folks who don't know, when you buy a gallon of gas at a gas station, that gas pump has been at some point tested by the Department of Agriculture to ensure that It's actually dispensing a gallon of gas. And that's the same kind of job that we're going to need to bring to the EV industry as well, based on legislation, as you know. So after that, I see our job basically as regulating pumps, so to speak. And then also I expect that we will have to engage in further rulemaking in the future as technology changes and as some of the wrinkles get ironed out in the rolling out of this, in my mind, still a fairly new technology where the industry itself hasn't really agreed on what the standards are at this point. So that's what I see our role as, a little less involved in some of the other larger agencies, but we still have a role. Additionally, we will be bringing on a policy analyst who will probably take over the EV portfolio. I have very limited technical experience in the area, and we kind of need that in our role. So that's where we're at. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for walking us through that, Brad. I did want to welcome in Anna Leasing from the governor's office, and Anna, give you a little bit of space to introduce yourself and your role and kind of the perspective that you bring to the transportation electrification work that the council will do.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Anna Leasing, I'm Governor Inslee's Energy Policy Advisor. I'm really excited to see the Coordinating Council kick off, mostly because I think, it was really falling on Debbie Driver and I to play that coordinating role. So it's really great to see the agencies come together in this more formal way. I'm trying to think about just the breadth of work that is in front of this council. Transportation emissions are the #1 source of emissions in Washington state, and it is top of mind always for our office. And how do we, build our clean energy future? And transportation electrification is a big area of focus for us, in addition to obviously finding more efficient ways and sustainable ways to move people and be able to get them into multimodal. But to the extent that we will still have folks relying on cars, we want to make sure that those are zero emission. And that requires a lot of planning, both in terms of making sure that there are charging stations for people to be able to easily access, and especially as we see electric vehicles become more mainstream and have mass adoption of that, we want to make sure that that's accessible for all Washingtonians, including folks who live in multifamily housing or places without dedicated parking, and that as you travel and roam around the state, that it is something where you don't have to think too hard about how you're going to recharge. And then I think I also take it a step further and really think about what does that mean for electricity grid as we see increased load from vehicle electrification. So, it's really important to have the state energy office as well as UTC in these conversations and working in close partnership with utilities and EV charging companies. Just understand where, how does that mapping of our EV charging infrastructure look like? And then what are the impacts across the grid, and how do we plan accordingly to make sure that we are ready for that? So that's really where I'm, looking forward to the work of the EV Council, is to help us strategize that future and make sure that we are ready for a future where all of our vehicles, hopefully not too distant future, are going to be zero emission.
Thanks so much for that, Anna, and thanks for your leadership and your partnership to help get us here and where we are going next. I know that you didn't hear the opening remarks from Chair Elias, but he talked about really kind of at a high level the road that we're facing, and so I appreciate you kind of naming discrete pieces that this coordinating council will need to take on. He recommended that we eat the elephant one bite at a time. And so it's nice to have many place settings around the table for us to do that together. And again, appreciate kind of the transportation focus and the grid focus as well. We've got about 5 minutes to the next section. I did just want to do a couple things. One, kind of mention why commerce, and then repeat back a couple of the themes that I heard from folks. So Commerce is an agency. If you don't know it, we do 110 different things to help strengthen communities across the state. And one of those things, in addition to HEAL Act implementation, is the work of the Energy Division with the State Energy Office, as you just said, Anna. And we have are working to implement the state's 2021 state energy strategy, which is focused on the the ways that the state can achieve our emissions goals in 2030, 2040, and 2050. The TLDR, too long didn't read, for the state energy strategy is that we can get there. And in order to do that, everyone has to do everything they can in order to hit those goals. And transportation is front and center in this work. We do policy work through the policy office. We also implement programs. Historically, we've run the electrification of the transportation system grants out of our Clean Energy Fund, which is focused on the utility innovation side of transportation electrification that Anna and Jason and others mentioned. And then we've recently received significant new funding for EV incentives and EVSE that folks have mentioned. Before I kind of pull those themes together, Tony, I just wanted to give you a minute if there was a way to condense everything that WSDOT does into a single minute. I wanted to give you a crack at trying to do that.
Great, thank you. Again, Tonya Buell with WSDOT. And I'm actually really getting jazzed up. I'm inspired by Senator Elias and Anna and Michael and all of you coming from different agencies. So just a little bit of background for those who may not know, but WSDOT, Washington State Department of Transportation, is a multimodal agency. We are not just about roads, we're about all kinds of travel for commuters and for freight. And our goal is to have safe, reliable, cost-effective transportation for Washingtonians and visitors, and to help communities with economic development, and really have a focus throughout the whole agency on diversity, equity, and inclusion. One of our goals, is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, as transportation is the largest source of pollution in our state. And so that could be either through fewer people driving or for using cleaner fuels. We have it's a big agency statewide. We have a lot of projects and programs going on to achieve our goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And I'll highlight a couple. One is our WSDOT's fleet of vehicles, especially the passenger fleet, up to date. And we are transitioning those to zero emission vehicles, and we're actually reducing the number of vehicles in our fleet as well, with the goal to reduce fuel use and provide fewer emissions. We also, as you know, run one of the largest ferry systems in this region, and we are working to electrify our ferry vessels. We are also working with transit agencies statewide on providing funding for general public transportation and shared rides and commute trip reduction, but also grants for zero emission buses and supporting infrastructure. And several of you on the council have been participants in evaluating those proposals, so thank you for that. And you've also been involved in reviewing proposals for our zero emission vehicle infrastructure partnerships program, which is highway corridor charging throughout the state. And that's something that we've been working on for more than a decade, starting with the creation of the West Coast Electric Highway, which is the nation's first and most robust charging network for multi-states, going all the way from British Columbia through Washington, Oregon, and California down to Baja, BC to BC. And so we've been a leader in charging infrastructure along our highways. And of course, we realized that we also need workplace charging, home charging, community charging. My focus has been on highway corridor charging and also supporting other programs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And one of the things that we'll be working closely with Commerce on and with you is a new mapping and forecasting tool that will help us determine when and where we need charging infrastructure. So I'm excited about that. And that's for light, medium, and heavy duty vehicles. And not just battery electric, but also hydrogen fuel cell refueling stations. And really, I'm excited to share with you in the coming months and years all of the activities and make sure that we're synergizing efforts and not duplicating. We started with just a program here or there, but now we're moving at a faster pace and it seems like every agency's got something going on, and pretty soon I believe that everyone will be thinking about and driving electric vehicles. So I'm really excited about this transformation coming. So thank you again for agreeing to be on this council. We're very excited about the work to come and helping shape the future of transportation electrification. Thank you.
Thanks, Tonya. Before we shift to a discussion about the council responsibilities and deliverables, many of which have been alluded to already, I just wanted to share a little bit about what I heard from this group. It's a really interesting point in time where we are. I heard folks I heard a lot about ongoing work, activities, programs, policies, regulatory regimes that agencies have in place. And on the other hand, I heard about folks who are listening and learning, and I'm curious how we'll bring those things together. I heard about different systems that we'll need to understand how they fit together as we electrify transportation in the state, but also the role that individuals and households will play in making decisions about their future as they go forward. There's work at the state level to set policy, set incentives. There's also work at the state level, literally, collaboration around our fleets and electrifying them. We've got focused work on corridors and communities. We've got fleets, funding, and really what has impressed me overall is this kind of focus on the future and the opportunities that we will have to make connections across agencies, ideas, things that we want to see happen from our very specific perspectives. That possibility is what strikes me at the moment, at this moment. So I'm excited about that possibility as well and look forward to realizing the potential with you all. With that, I'll ask Stephen Hershkowitz, who's legislative lead for the Energy Division at the Department of Commerce and has been instrumental in helping set up the council. He's going to walk us through the responsibilities and deliverables so that we and members of the public who are here today or watching at a later date are all on the same page. Stephen, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, thanks.
All right. So we heard from Chair Leas earlier about some of the legislature's intent and findings in creating this coordinating council, but I thought it would be a good place to start with that section of the Move Ahead Washington Bill 5974 in section 427, which is where they list out legislative findings and intent. I think there's three key conclusions that they reach in here. One is that we have to drastically reduce vehicle greenhouse gas emissions in order for the state to reach its overall emissions reductions limits. The second conclusion they reach here is that a critical strategy for reducing those emissions is transitioning to zero emission vehicles, obviously alongside reducing vehicle miles traveled and getting people into more options for transportation. And then the third conclusion here is that that transition is going to require a significant amount of collaboration and coordination between agencies and the state government level. And obviously with partners at the local government level, federal government level, and all of our stakeholders. And so that's really the foundation in which this coordinating council is brought together. As you see in the third bullet point, the intent then moves into forming the council really to do two main things. One is leveraging state and federal dollars and maximizing those resources to get infrastructure in the ground so that people have access to charging stations as they move into electric vehicles and other zero emission vehicles. And then the second piece of this is to make sure that that infrastructure and those opportunities and access to electric vehicles are available and accessible to all Washingtonians. This is done equitably and that everyone has access to those resources. So that's where I wanted to start off in setting the groundwork here as we move into more specific responsibilities. So we have time shortly on the agenda to talk about implementation of the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, or NEVI program that WashDOT is leading. And so just citing here that in one of the transportation budget bills that was passed this session, the legislature asked the coordinating council to give direction on that program and that program's implementation. And so that's why the council will be taking action on moving that forward today. And we'll continue to work closely with WashDOT on how that moves forward. And then we move into some of the core responsibilities of the coordinating council listed out in the legislative language. The key one here, develop a statewide transportation electrification strategy. There is no specific due date for that strategy, but it is clear as we go through the other responsibilities that everything really fits either underneath that or in coordination with it. Legislature asks us to identify all electric vehicle infrastructure grant-related funding, both existing and future opportunities. So you can see how that might fit under an electrification strategy. It asks the council to coordinate grant funding criteria across agency grant programs. So this is something that I believe many of the departments have already been doing in electric vehicle programs across the agencies, and this just creates a more formal place where agencies can use this coordinating council to continue or build up that work. And then another piece of this section is developing a robust public and private outreach plan that includes engaging specifically at minimum with two main sets of stakeholders, community organizers and the Environmental Justice Council, on making sure that the benefits of our work reaches overburdened populations, and then working closely with local governments on implementation. Continuing on in their responsibilities under this section, we need to create an advisory committee or multiple advisory committees, some formal way that this council is going to be getting feedback and input from stakeholders. We need to, again, ensure that all of the work that the council does and that the agencies do in their own programs or rulemakings, that the benefits of those actions reach vulnerable and overburdened communities. And then the last sort of tangible responsibility listed out in this section of the bill is providing annual reports on the council's work. Further up in the bill, in section 415, the legislature asks the coordinating council to develop a scoping plan for achieving the target that Senator Elias articulated so well to us earlier in the meeting, that we try to reach all new passenger and light duty vehicles starting with model year 2030 or later that are sold, purchased, or registered in Washington be electric vehicles. And that scoping plan does have a specific due date of December 31st, 2023. So one of the decisions that the council will have is whether it wants to fold that scoping plan into an overall electrification strategy and use that as a due date for the overall strategy. So I've listed out a couple different questions that the council have to figure out decisions on. in organizing its work. But those are the main responsibilities that you'll be tasked with completing. So happy to answer any questions that council members have about those items. But I think we also want to hear council members' ideas on ways that we can structure this work if it makes sense to fit some of those responsibilities under the strategy overall, whether we want to make sure we're doing the outreach planning early on in the process, in addition to listing it out and making it a section of that strategy. But wanted to get those in front of us as we start our work and then see how people react.
Thanks for walking us through that, Stephen. I think the first question that comes to mind to me, I mentioned in the opening, Chair Elias mentioned in the opening, and I think it's come up a couple times as well around the HEAL Act. And I'm curious, it didn't really come up a lot in the discussions from the agencies, but it seems like connecting our HEAL Act teams, the agency representatives who are part of the interagency working group, to connect them to this process. And I'm curious whether folks have already started to make connections within agencies, or how they feel about to start by making internal connections and helping those folks that are trying to implement the environmental justice law aware of what we were trying to do on the transportation electrification side of things. Not sure if anybody's taken the first step there. I'm not hearing a lot, so I'm gonna maybe Stephen ask you to make a note that we take that as a possible action item for later on. Think about and talk through the connections between this work and both the EJ Council and the interagency work groups and our agency representatives. There's a lot in what you just described. There's a lot in what Anna described and what's Chair Lee has described. I'm curious what other questions are coming up from members of the council. What's on your mind when you think through this body of work and the elements that that Stephen just laid out? I see your hand, Courtney.
So one of the things that I think we should definitely try to prioritize, I know you had mentioned annual reports. Currently, the way that all of our state vehicle fleets are overseen, like I mentioned, there's 4 big buckets or entities that have kind of the largest vehicle fleet. But at no point can anybody say right now, this is how many state vehicle fleets there are in Washington state, because though we have those 4 big buckets of agency fleets, there's agency-owned fleets as well. So I think the first thing, if I could nominate one thing to tackle first and foremost, is to understand our baseline, understand how many total state vehicle passenger fleets do we have, not just within WashDOT, DES, DNR, and others, but the entire Washington state. So then we can truly identify how many vehicles is it going to mean to get to 40% by 2025. Do we have 12,000 in Washington state? Do we have 15,000 in Washington state? There's no reporting entity that the state fleets have to say, hey, this is how many vehicles are in my fleet this year. Nobody's able to answer that question right now. And if we're going to be having the annual reports and wanting to make these targets, first needing to understand our baseline data, I think is going to be vital.
Thanks for that offering. I think knowing where you are, probably across a number of dimensions, including the fleets one that you mentioned, is a good place to help you help us know how we can get to where we want to go. What else is coming up for members of the council when it comes to our responsibilities and questions that are on your mind or thoughts that are on your mind? I've got one thing lift up from the chat, and then I'll let you jump in, Tonya.
I was just going to mention the chat.
Well,
So
I'm
perfect.
glad we're thinking the same as co-chairs for this council. So there's for those who can see it, or can't see it, there's a question in the chat asking about whether there's anyone on the council from workforce or labor, and a comment, they are a largely vital stakeholder group, and therefore I was curious. Thank you. And so the council itself is made up of state agencies that are identified in the Move Ahead Washington. We'll talk later on after we hear from Chair Fye, after we go over the NEVI plan and have our break, about some of the elements about how we will do our work, including advisory groups. And so that to me feels like the question is about, who else needs to be here. Talked about communities identified by the environmental health disparities map. We've got this comment about workforce and labor. And while there might not be a role for them on the council, there is a way to bring those perspectives in to the work of the council through either work groups or advisory groups. So thanks for that question and for that comment. Any other thoughts or questions on the role, responsibility, the work ahead for the council? Well, we'll be meeting regularly, and there will be many opportunities for us to think through the questions that are in our minds and that will come up as we proceed along the work. I wanted to invite Chair Fye to make some remarks. Thank you so much for being here, Chair Fye. Thank you so much for your leadership and helping to bring Move Ahead Washington in this council, which is a part of it, and a part that will help the state navigate towards the goals and the work in that legislation to fruition. And just wanted to give you space to let us know how you're feeling about this work and what's on your mind. If you're ready, the floor is yours.
Well, great. Thank you, Michael, and very much appreciate the work that's been done to date by the various agencies that have been involved in this space, really making sure that we meet our goal of moving towards EVs or hydrogen-powered vehicles in a very short time frame. I just have a few points that I would make. First of all and foremost, I want you to walk away with is to the extent you're running into issues with what the legislature has done and what the federal government has done, that may be a barrier or impeding your work in reaching the very important objectives. I want to highlight that first because we need to know about that. We need to break down those barriers. We need to make sure that you can get in there and do your work, because my take on the situation is you've got a huge challenge, and in a good day. And with the challenges that we have now with supply disruptions, with workforce related issues, it makes it even that much more difficult. We have to go at a full out kind of pace here. And so there's a lot to be accomplished, a lot of critical decision making to be made, a lot of important infrastructure decision making to make sure that we have a system that's going to work for folks. I had the experience, I have an EV, I have had the experience of counting on an EV station down in Southwest Washington. That my reading on my vehicle was that there were stations available, only to find out that Walmart had pulled them out. So this is a a nascent kind of industry. There's been a lot of ups and downs. So I think it's really important that we make sure that we've got the work that is being done to identify all the locations, the work that's being done to make sure that we have an updated list so that we don't increase barriers for folks on being able to take advantage of the EV technology. This is probably the most important piece we have in our electrification objectives, is having an infrastructure that's going to work with people, for people. And I think we're at a good spot where there's a lot more interest in individuals making investments in electric vehicles. And so we need to do what we can to make that happen for people and feel that they can reliably count on a system that works. I know that there's always interagency challenges. I suggest that you folks try to work through those and come up with the best solutions and to get to the ultimate aim here, which is to make a tremendous market impact with EVs and to have an infrastructure that supports that. I think some of you know from my past history that I've been working on renewables and energy efficiency, and with the Green Transportation Bill in 2019, this has been an important piece of the work that I do, and I really believe that you can be successful at making this happen and realizable for folks, and so that we can have something that's very proud that we've done, and also that other states can hopefully learn from us. The many states that are behind us already and not in front of us. So thank you for the opportunity to say hello. Your work's important, and like I said, let us know if there are any impediments that we're responsible for that we can do something about and make your life more possible to get this work done. We're there for you. The work's important. I think you sense that there isn't a whole lot of space between the commitment that Senator Elias and I have to this subject matter. So take advantage of that and call on us when you need us.
Thank you so much. No, I was going to reflect back that you all seem very aligned, but are using different words. I heard, big challenge, let's get it done. He said that we have powerful friends, and I heard you say, let's talk when issues arise. So I appreciate you setting those expectations forward, and thanks for bringing us together. Look forward to partnering with you as we move forward.
I'm looking for great things from you folks. So
we are too. We'll count on it.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, Tonya, I'm going to turn things over to you and the WSDOT team and allow you to walk us through the NEVI plan. If you and your folks are ready, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you to Representative Phi for joining us today and for your leadership. Your green transportation package has really been instrumental in getting a lot of these projects and programs up and running. And we appreciate your support now and promises for support in the future. It is going to be a challenge, but I think together we're up for this challenge. So thank you very much for that. So I believe that Jim Jensen has shared his screen, but would you please stop sharing your screen, because I made a revised PowerPoint. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and I'll advance the slides for us. So hold on one second. All right, let's see. Okay. That's why you are usually the one that does this. Okay, so I'm here to talk about the National EV Infrastructure Plan. And you would make my day if you approve this plan and approve us moving forward after the end of it. I will share my screen now and do the slideshow from beginning. Can everybody see that? Jim, can you confirm? Okay,
Yep.
Awesome. All right, so I'm gonna.
Sorry to interrupt. We're actually seeing your full screen, including like your notes and.
Oh.
So Tanya, if you go to the display settings at the top there, yeah, and switch, that's perfect.
Thank you. Yeah, I want you to be surprised when you see the next slide coming up. Okay. All right, let's get started on today's presentation on the Washington State Plan for Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Deployment. And we're really excited about this funding from the federal government to put in charging along our interstates and US highways. And we had a very short timeline to put together an awesome state plan, which will unlock the federal funding that is allocated for Washington State. And so we have a whole team, including all the members on this council. There's a team of planners within WashDOT, support from Commerce. And so I am going to be speaking today to give you an overview of the plan, and Jim Jensen, who has been the technical assistant for local governments and doing public engagement for us, is going to be talking about the public outreach, community outreach. But I know it's been the work of many, many people working very hard to get this done in such a short timeline, as we need to submit our plan by August 1st, which is in about a week. So let's go ahead and move forward. So today we're going to talk about the NEVI program. I'm going to present our plan, and then Jim's going to review the stakeholder engagement, and then we're going to come together as an Interagency EV Coordinating Council, or IVEC, and vote to approve the plan and move forward. So let's get started. Let's see. So the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program is part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, and it is one of 15 provisions in that law, and it includes $5 billion over 5 years of formula funds that are allocated for state departments of transportation to build out highway corridor charging. There is a companion 2.5 billion available, and those are competitive funds with different guidelines, and I believe that any entity will be able to apply for those grants, and we will find out more in the coming months about what that entails. Today, I'm focused on the formula funds, the 5 billion, of which 71 million is allocated to Washington over the next 5 years. And it provides 80% of the funds needed for the installation of fast charging infrastructure. And the national goals are really to connect all of our communities nationwide with charging stations every 50 miles along all of the interstates and US highways, or highways of significance. And the goal is to have 500,000 electric vehicle chargers. there is a big emphasis, just like we have in Washington State, but at the federal level for Justice 40, to make sure that we are sharing the benefits with all, including disadvantaged communities. The goal ultimately is to excel adoption of electric vehicles, make the transition so everyone is driving less or driving electric, and we're cleaning up our air and reducing our fuel use. For this particular formula funding, the requirements are to have charging stations every 50 miles along designated corridors, with each station will need to have a minimum of 150 kilowatt DC fast chargers using the combo charging system. And the first investments must be made on those corridors that have been designated as EV corridors through the Alternative Fuel Corridor Program. So in Washington, you'll see maps of this. That's I-5, I-82, I-90, US 101, US 195, and US 395. And note that there is an opportunity every year to designate additional alternative fuel corridors. And so we'll be working with the EV Coordinating Council on that for future investments. The bulk of the funding is for the EV charging infrastructure, and some of the funding may also be used for operating assistance, especially in areas where low usage is anticipated until there are a lot more electric vehicles on our roads. Installation of signage to let people know where the chargers are and to build confidence for non-EV drivers that there are plenty of chargers out there. We can also use the funding for development phase activities, including mapping and forecasting, as long as it's specific to highway corridor charging. And I just want to make sure everyone understands WSDOT does not plan to own and operate these. We plan to go through a competitive bidding process and contract out with a third party for acquisition, installation, operations, and maintenance. So it's very similar to WSDOT's ZVIP program, which is state funding for highway corridor charging. Through the state program, we only allow nonprofits and government agencies to apply, but this program is different. It's going to be much bigger investment per site, and we are encouraging private sector partners to put together proposals. Similar to our 10 agencies coming together for the coordinating council, the same thing's happening at the federal level. And the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation is a new office that is forming right now. Right now, it's not fully staffed. There are federal employees from different agencies, from the US DOT and Department of Energy, that are on loan to this program while they build it up. But they're off to a good start. They have a website, and they've put together guidelines for the NEVI program and a template that we used for our state plan. And they have all kinds of resources available. So I've provided the links here because I think these tools would be helpful for all of us. And I think it's kind of funny that the newest version that I've seen of a tool to help DOTs with planning is the Smart, Equitable, and Grid Aware planning. I'd never heard Grid Aware, but that is really important as we move forward. And that's why Department of Energy and Transportation at the federal level have come together, just like we are in Washington State. thank you for all of your support and contributions from the last few months. We have included in the state plan all of your near-term planned investments. And so thank you for providing that and other input. Because of the way the legislation was set up and the appropriation of funds, the coordinating council will be directing WSDOT on the NEVI activities over the next 5 years. Ultimately, WSDOT is responsible to Federal Highway Administration for all of the management and billing and oversight and contracting and all that. But our coordinating council will be able to provide a lot of feedback on updates to plans and other alternative corridors and more. So this is just the beginning. As far as Washington State, there are more than 100 DC fast charging locations and dozens of Tesla supercharger stations, but there are only 28 stations that meet the new NEVI requirements of 450 kilowatt DC fast chargers. And here you can see where those are located. And the green lines represent the areas where we must make the first investments. We need to fully build out those corridors before investing in other roadways. And you'll hear more about that. I mentioned earlier the state program for highway corridor charging, and we recently announced our proposed awards for that. We only had about $10 million, but nearly $40 million in requests. So there are a lot of projects that didn't get funded, but the ones that rose to the top are very exciting. We are finally, after 10 years, updating the legacy West Coast Electric Highway charging stations, 6 on I-5, 4 on US 2, and 2 on I-90. And so those, which are CHAdeMO only now, will have the addition, new equipment and combo charging system charging. So they'll be able to be used by all plug-in electric vehicle drivers, and also eligibility for e-bikes and e-scooters and e-wheelchairs to plug in as well, with 110 outlets available. We also have 12 brand new sites that we're really excited about, including 5 that, or 6 that serve our state ferry routes on the west side of the peninsula. And you can find out more about this here. But I wanted to mention that we have been working on highway corridor charging for many years and have aligned with the federal program. So we're ahead of most states in that way. The elements of the plan include these different areas with a heavy focus on public engagement and how we're going to contract out for the services and evaluate. And right now the plan vision is that all Washingtonians and visitors will have the ability to use an electric vehicle and find convenient, affordable, accessible, fast charging stations. And I need to fix this, but it should say reliable, because reliability is key. The early stages of electric vehicle charging, there have been different companies in and out of this industry, and not all of them have been 100% reliable or communicated when some are shut down, as Representative Phi mentioned. So the most important thing as far as operating of these charging stations is that they're reliable and they're there when you need them. So they're available 24/7 and and EV drivers have access to a toll-free number for any issues that come up. But reliability is going to be a very important part of the evaluation of proposals. Our goals include filling the gaps, making sure we're completing the corridors with charging at least every 50 miles, and also looking at other roadways that we want to bring into the NEVI program. We also have a very high focus on disadvantaged communities and rural communities, and our contracting will show that. With our requests for proposals are going to have a heavy emphasis on that. And we are, like I mentioned, resiliency and reliability are very important, and they're important to the federal government and they're important to Washington state government. And right now we have about more than 100,000 EVs on our road, and we want to have 5 times that in the next 5 years. So we've got our work cut out for us. I mentioned Justice 40, which is a federal initiative where at least 40% of the overall benefits from federal investments in clean energy flow to disadvantaged communities. And that is very important to us. And we are including that in all of our planning documents. So it was great to hear that a lot of the agencies on the coordinating council have those same goals. Equity is also very important. And I mentioned the Justice 40 goal, but we really want to make sure electric vehicles are available, accessible by all. I mentioned we did a lot of community outreach, and you can go to WashDOT's NEVI plan webpage and find the draft plan. The final plan, once approved by the council, will be published there as well. We had a survey, an interactive map, and opportunity to send email, and you'll hear a little bit more about that from Jim. And the timeline is very condensed. It's amazing that we pulled this off in such a short amount of time. We started working on our state plan in April, and we had a draft last month, and we're going to vote on it today and get it submitted to the feds by August 1st. And we've been waiting for federal requirements that were supposed to come out in mid-May. And instead, the federal government has published a rulemaking process and is taking comments on that through August 22nd, so for another month. And then I'm not sure when their final requirements are going to come out, but we're going to need those detailed requirements in order to do our request for proposals and contracting. So everything's a little delayed just because this is a new program. It's new for the federal government, it's new for the states, and we're working towards getting materials developed and getting a request for proposal out. The good news is that the funds for this do not expire, so the $71 million is there for us. over the next 5 years and beyond. I mentioned earlier the zero emission vehicle mapping and forecasting tool, and that's something we did a lot of public outreach on. That is our first officially coordinated effort among WSDOT, Commerce Energy Office, Ecology, and the Office of Equity. And we are developing a mapping and forecasting tool that shows where EV drivers are now, where the charging infrastructure is now, and where we need to have EV charging in the future to meet our goals. And so we'll be working on this in parallel to the activities of the EV Coordinating Council. And I think this is going to be a very helpful tool for the Coordinating Council as this gets developed and implemented, and it will help us with thinking of our big plans and big vision and funding requests to meet the goals that you've heard about from our elected officials who are chairing the transportation committees. And now I would like to hand over the mic to Jim Jensen, who's going to talk about our public involvement efforts. Thanks.
Thank you, Tonya. For those in the audience who may not know me, I'm Jim Jensen. I'm the alternative fuel and transportation electrification specialist at the WSU Energy Program. We're an independent organization in the university, and we have over the years provided energy expertise to agencies and state government and utilities around the state. And we operate a green transportation program funded by the legislature to provide education and technical assistance to local fleets. So all the public fleets that aren't in a state agency, like school buses, school districts, or transit agencies, cities, counties, ports, public utilities. And it's through that kind of work that I've worked with Tonya and WSDOT in projects over the years. And in the plan, we thought it was important to make sure the federal government was aware of the long history of public involvement in this area. So going back more than a decade to the original EV task force that was co-hosted by Department of Transportation and Department of Commerce, and that developed an EV roadmap back in 2011. There was the EV action plan that provided guidance from 2015 to 2020. And the original ZVIP investments starting back in 2017 all included public involvement in developing the rules and how the grants were to be provided. The most recent public involvement was very detailed for the ZEV mapping and forecasting tool. That happened last fall. We had multiple public listening sessions, reached out to hundreds of organizations around the state, and did presentations that were attended by over 500 people, either as individuals or in small groups, sometimes geographic groups. And then more recently, we've kind of extended and followed up from that ZEV mapping engagement to do specific plan engagement for the NEVI plan. If you go to the next slide, there were several objectives identified for that specific engagement around the NEVI plan. Of course, most important, we wanted to make sure to identify and engage with the mandated stakeholder groups mandated by the Federal Highway Administration. We identified popular engagement methods, collected feedback on preferred types of stations, preferred connectors, preferred location priorities, engaged stakeholders and the public to ensure the plan will have equitable outcomes, made sure there was ADA compliance in the station development, collected feedback about how people would want to be engaged and developed ideas about how to evaluate customer satisfaction, establish strategies for continuing to seek input and consider the needs of those traditionally underrepresented by existing transportation systems. And we provided a contact to respond to public questions. So we collected information, comments from the public through July 15th for this specific draft of the plan that will be submitted. But the department continues to collect feedback, continues to have their partnerships email address open for people to provide comments and feedback that could be included in the next update of the plan. Next. Through the engagement last fall and this spring, we've, as I mentioned, contacted hundreds of organizations, developed a 1,000+ email list. You can share your own email with the department to get on the list for future engagement. And over the last several months, have engaged with a lot of different government agencies at the state and local level, planning organizations, including transportation planning organizations, native governments, clean air agencies, economic development agencies, as well lots of industry contacts, business and labor organizations, the companies who manufacture and install the EVSE, or the electrical supply electric vehicle supply equipment. Vehicle manufacturers have been involved, as well as their associations, the Washington Trucking Association and others involved in freight movement, gas station, convenience store, and hospitality organizations, as well as women and minority-owned business groups. And then from the community side, the drivers, of course, have represented themselves well, as well as non-governmental organizations who may be involved in energy, utility issues, transportation electrification, representatives from the environmental justice community, active transportation groups, and those involved with disability rights. The activities included a dedicated web page at the department, a fact sheet. We had 2 public listening sessions in June on the 2nd and 8th, and we had 263 participants in just those 2 sessions. We had separate public presentations to specific groups, an online survey, social media and email promotion, and an interactive map that Tony had mentioned. At the listening sessions, we did some polls, looked to see who was participating in those listening sessions. You could see a lot of engagement from local governments, state agencies, some from nonprofits, a lot of interest from private organizations in the industry, and community representatives. We asked people about whether they drive electric vehicles, or if they think they'll be driving an electric vehicle in the next 5 years. And you can see quite a bit of participation from people who already drive, but a good number of people who can see themselves in an electric car in the next 5 years. We also asked how people prefer to receive information. A lot of requests for email updates. Should we install any of the higher powered chargers? That's something that Oregon has been looking at. And a good number say yes at major sites. We should be thinking forward, thinking toward the future to install higher powered chargers that could possibly serve medium or heavy duty trucks, or trucks with trailers. And some say not required, but quite a few say yes, they should be there. We also asked how important is it that the new infrastructure development still work for the early EV technology, specifically the CHAdeMO connector that was used in early EVs manufactured from Asia. 20%, or roughly 20% thought that was very important, that it should be a requirement. Others said it's somewhat important or have no opinion. A good number felt that it was at least something that maybe should be provided extra points if people can provide the Chatham Oak connector in the future development of these charging locations. And then how should we prioritize sites? Most of the people thought that the areas with the highest vehicle traffic on these major corridors should be the first priority, but perhaps the second priority is to make sure to increase access to disadvantaged communities throughout the state. So trying to balance those two issues of high traffic and disadvantaged communities and provide the points in the scoring criteria for that. Next, we collected 115 stakeholder questions or comments through the public listening sessions. They ranged from everything having to do with the competitive bidding process, labor and workforce considerations, equity, access, ideas, Justice 40 considerations. That's the federal program for Justice 40. Technology standards, what should be the requirements for the providers or the installers of the equipment, what's happening with funding and grants, who can participate. They had a lot of comments or several comments about sort of planning these installations to serve the medium and heavy duty vehicles among fleets or in local communities. What are the grant opportunities again? More about technology and the types of connectors. What will be the charging costs? How will that be managed to make sure that these are affordable for people? People asked about location considerations, and that's again where the interactive map came in. Next. Lots of suggestions for locations. Rest stops is a common one in some of these listening sessions. State parks or areas where there are tourist attractions. Highway 2 going around Stevens Pass, the peninsula or the coastal areas. People suggested mall parking lots or grocery parking lots where there's place for people to charge and things to do while the vehicle is charging. Seattle, sports stadiums, large public attractions, recreational sites near colleges and on routes to colleges was another suggestion, and near popular trailheads. Next. The department did a survey, and these were some of the initial survey results received. A high percentage of the people responding to that survey already drive a battery electric or plug-in electric vehicle. Only 16% were not interested in EV technology right now. 10% drove more than 50 miles per day, but the majority drove under 19 miles per day on average. So a good candidate for an electric vehicle. Most drivers use the level 2 charger at home. Others, of course, use the DC fast charge on the road to get longer distances. Among the prioritized corridors, people like the I-5 and I-90 corridors. Next. For nominating additional EV corridors, people like US 2, US 12, and US 97 are the preferred nominations. Again, they in the survey provided similar comments about prioritization, making sure to cover the heavily trafficked areas and then providing access to disadvantaged communities. People really want to see restrooms at these locations, as well as food options. And then there were other amenities that people liked as well. And then yes, build out for additional capacity. So we asked, should the stations be built out to handle additional capacity? So maybe points are given in the criteria for the NEVI station locations that rather than squeezing in 4 chargers where there's only 4 spots, we look at locations where there are more than 4 locations in the future. You might do 4 now and then be able to build out for additional capacity and be thinking about how the power requirements may also grow over time. The benefits to EVs, we know these for the most part: less pollution, a quieter landscape, lower greenhouse gases, and reduced transportation costs. And there are some big transportation burdens throughout the state of Washington, especially in rural areas and among low income or moderate income communities. And with gas prices going higher, being able to reduce your transportation costs gains more popularity. Potential disadvantages that people identified include job losses, perhaps stress on the electrical grid, especially in localized areas, and then just the overall upfront costs of the electric vehicles. We asked people open-ended questions about some of those other things. We got a lot of industry comments to the partnerships at dot.wa.gov website, so that email address is open. A number of players in the EV industry participated and provided formal comments. In total, there were 65 formal comments at that email address, which have been cataloged and provided to the coordinating council. And next up, we see that the themes, the common industry themes, touched on some of those same things that we heard from other stakeholders, but we're also more specific maybe to the industry representatives about contracting with multiple providers and not just giving one provider the entire state. Thinking about what the payment methods and requirements are and how that connects in with the regulations from the Department of Agriculture. What are the warranty packages required? The O&M plans or operating and maintenance plans. What's the protocol used for the software and what are the data requirements, reporting requirements, making sure that the state lays out exactly how they want to use the data collected from these stations. Consider opportunities for rural charging. What are the different connector types, ownership and operation structures that allow some flexibility there was one of the comments. What are the specific labor requirements? That's a frequent one. And then promote speed and scalability. So those maybe those companies that have the charging equipment ready or have the other sorts of power equipment that might be required, have that ready to go when the money comes out. Next, big thank you. And I'll turn it back to Tony.
Great, thank you so much, Jim, for your presentation and covering a wealth of activities and comments that we've received. I know we're getting close to break time, but before we break, I just wanted to let you know, as Steve Hershkowitz mentioned, the legislature has directed the coordinating council to direct WashDOT's efforts in this NEVI program. And so the first way that the coordinating council can direct WashDOT is to adopt the plan and allow for WashDOT to move forward through the submission process. And the plan is a living document. We keep getting great suggestions and feedback and ideas, and the plan will be updated annually, and the council will be able to continue to contribute to the plan and oversee the plan and the implementation, including reviewing our requests for proposal materials, adding alternative fuel corridors. But this initial state plan, our best effort in a short amount of time, is really a visionary document. It contains some plans within the plan for continued community engagement. And we really need to get this plan in order to unlock the federal fund approved plan from Federal Highway Administration, and then we can get to work on this program. So I ask that somebody propose a motion.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tonya. What I'd like for folks to do on the council, if you've got the bandwidth, would be to turn on your cameras. And then we'll go through the list alphabetically by agency, starting with agriculture, and just get a sense of how members of the council want to vote. So that'll be how we run through this. I see you there, Brad. How do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. Courtney for DES. Dustin for ecology.
Aye.
Thank you. Paula for health.
Aye.
Thank you. Eric for OFM.
Aye.
Thank you. Patty for OSPI.
Aye.
Thank you. Ian Kinderpile for SEEP.
Aye.
Thank you. Jason Lewis for the UTC.
Aye.
Thank you. Courtney for DES.
There,
I
I
see
can
your
hit mute
chat.
now. Aye.
Thank you so much. Tonya, how do you vote for WashDOT?
Aye.
And I vote for Commerce as well, Michael Furs. So Tonya and the team at WashDOT, thank you so much for all of the work and for everyone here on the call who's contributed in some way to lifting this plan up and getting it to this point as a huge effort. So thank you and congratulations to the council for taking this step forward, despite whatever Wi-Fi or connectivity challenges we might have, to approve the plan and enable WashDOT to submit by the August 1st deadline. With that, we're going to take a 20-minute break. My math is, hit or miss, but I think that means we'll be back at 10:48. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Stephen, could you put that
Thank you.
in the chat?
Yes, definitely can.
Thanks. All right, welcome back, everybody. For folks on the council, can I get a quick camera check or an emoji just so that I know that folks are back? Thank you. I had a moment to step outside. It's absolutely beautiful in Olympia today. So I hope it is beautiful wherever you are as well. Looks like we've got folks here. So we'll move forward. Thanks again to everyone who contributed to the NEVI plan for all the work that was done to get it to that point. I'm going to shift the focus a little bit and talk about the governance of the council, how we will go about making decisions. And so the intent really here is to start the conversation and not to, the expectation is not to make a decision today. I know, Ian, that you have a lot of experience with the governing council for SEEP. Each of you bring experience from different roles that you play in your roles when it comes to decision-making processes. And so, I wanted to see if there was anybody who wanted to offer a little bit of a vision of what they want to see, what they most want to see happen when it comes to the decision-making process for the council. But before we go there, Ian, if you're with us, if you could turn your camera on, maybe share some insights that you have when it comes to the work that you do on the SEEP Governing Council. If you're here. Well, I'll bring you in, Ian, when you get back. So with that, I'm looking for perspective from members in the council for what you would most like to see happen when it comes to our decision-making process. And I realize that this is a little bit of a challenging moment to step into the Zoom space with folks watching on, but what's there? What's there for you? What do you want to see with our governance? See you there, Jason. What's on your mind?
Yeah. So, and I appreciate the question, and I apologize if I answer maybe a little bit more broadly, but just in general, I think that looking at the chat, it was brought up earlier about some of the public engagement opportunities to kind of get a little bit more information, whether it's through subcommittees or what have you. But if there was the ability to kind of address those kind of core elements that's been described, some of the barriers for the policy changes, how to create confidence and consistency. And then, hearing from all those that are interested in this issue, but being able to funnel that up into something that's more actionable from our perspective, I think would be great. Trying to get those topics maybe out ahead of time. So if there's any interested party work or any of that can be done, maybe being able to bring that to the members as well. And then I've really appreciated just the dynamics and engagement and leadership from today's meeting. So I think that this has been a great model kind of moving forward.
Thanks for that, Jason, and thanks for being the person willing to step into the Zoom void first. So I think I heard a couple things in there. Kind of key pieces is being able to broadly engage with stakeholders of all types in a way that allows them to be prepared for whatever issues and items we want to discuss, and there are many in front of us for that discussion. In addition to having that engagement and creating that space, having a way to, I think, curate that information and make it as useful as possible for folks on the council to act on it. Is that fair?
Absolutely. I think you summed it up a lot better than I did, actually. So thank you.
My pleasure. Ian, I see you. Thanks for coming on. And I'm curious your thoughts, especially given all of your work and expertise with the SEEP Governing Council. When it comes to our decision-making structure, what do you most want to see happen?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. And sorry, I missed you earlier. I was refereeing a dog and a cat. With the SEEP Governing Council, something that I think you actually just alluded to some of these dynamics inadvertently. What we have found to be really successful is asking and requiring action from the members of that council. And so, effectively assigning work and asking for very direct input seems to be a better mechanism to kind of create a really positive governance structure and environment where a lot of really good work can be done, rather than asking the council to operate as like a rubber stamping committee. So that would be kind of something that I would, be really looking forward to and thinking about as we progress.
Thanks for that, Ian. I hope everything is okay with the dog and the cat.
Yes, everything's fine. It was just
so yeah, appreciate that perspective. What else comes up for folks when you think about our governance? I heard kind of the need for action among members, and that feels vital. We're all bringing, as we heard earlier, different perspectives, different roles, different scopes. Some are interconnected, some are not, and we're bringing different expertise and experience. So I think it will be interesting to see how we can gel those things together into a kind of a cohesive form. But I like the bias for action after learning and listening. What else is coming up for folks on the council when it comes to our decision-making process? Hey, Paula, I see your hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I just wanted to support the concept that was mentioned, I think, by Jason. The subcommittee structure might be productive, especially for health's ongoing engagement. Some of the implementation aspects of this might not be, that relevant for us, but certainly continuing to be engaged in the HEAL discussion and the public outreach aspects of this would be of interest.
Great, thanks. A second for subcommittee structure. Other thoughts that folks want to put on the table in our first meeting? I think there's a lot to work from there. Jason, and let's go with Courtney first, please.
I would just mirror everything that has been said so far, but also kind of building on it a little bit, not just having action-oriented plans, but also ensuring that every member on this council is active champions, making sure that you're taking what we're here is discussed here or decisions being made, and ensuring transparency to the rest of their organizations, and really serving as a champion and showing that commitment. Also making sure that we're setting clear milestones. I know this is new space. I mean, EVSC, there's a lot of things still being figured out, a lot of new vehicle models coming to market. So making sure that we're setting very clear milestones. Transparency is very important. Making sure that we're making data and research-driven decisions, and ensuring that we are timely in our milestones or decision-making. Like I mentioned, because this is kind of a new area, if you will, of alternative vehicle fuels, sometimes it can be often the norm of, well, let's just wait until to see what that agency or see what that state does. And oftentimes that's not the case. We have to be humble in knowing that, what, this is a new journey. We're going to make mistakes, but we can't pause our actions just to wait for others. And we have to be okay with kind of being the pioneers, if you will. So that's all I would have to add.
Yeah, thanks for that. So I heard a couple things there. The kind of openness to mistakes as a way to learn, the need to establish kind of both transparent and clear metrics and milestones, and have that be part of the focus of our work. But I also heard, like, within the agencies and across, like, how do we serve as champions, and then how do we push information out to other folks who are not seated at this table. Thanks so much for that, Courtney. Jason.
Thank you. And just a number of the points Courtney actually covered, which was great. And the only other thing I would add is because we can't be the experts on all things that we're going to be tackling, consideration of if there is a large lift or a very technical lift, just a process for us to consider whether or not we need to bring in a consultant or someone to do some of that lifting for us. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thanks for breaking the ice on that, Jason. We'll chat a little bit about consultants, but now I know how you're thinking about it, so that makes me feel good. What I'd like to ask is for a couple of volunteers to work with me and to try and develop some proposals around governance, around committees for the council to take action on at our next meeting, which I realize, it'll be a month away. So there's, a pace that we will have to work to accomplish some of the things that you all have offered. Show of hands, anyone who's willing to step forward and act as a volunteer?
Michael, the ask is to be involved in the creation of the committees, of the subcommittees.
Thanks for asking for clarification. What I'd like to do is to pull together a small group here that can make proposals about governance, and about committees and some of the work products that have been offered here today. I see your hand, Jason. Thank you. See your hand, Ian. See your hand, Dustin and Courtney. All right. Thank you so much for the conversation and for what will come next. Appreciate it. Tonya, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you talk a little bit about advisory committees, which are imagined in the work that we're doing here. So the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Well, I put together a few slides. This is really just to get the discussion going. And we've already heard some suggestions about subcommittees, and I want to share with you a document that I put together. Can everybody see this slide about the Washington State Industry Electric Vehicle Advisory Committee?
Okay, we still see it
in your notes
view again.
Oh, okay, thank you. How about now?
Yep, it's good.
Okay, thank you. I'm learning. So that's great. So in the state law around the Interagency EV Coordinating Council, there's just one line that says that the council is to create an industry EV advisory committee. It doesn't say who's on it, when they meet, what their roles are. So that's up to us as the coordinating council. And so we know that there are quite a few industry stakeholders that are interested. If you remember back to Jim Jensen's slide about all of the 65 formal comments we received, there is a lot of interest from EVSE providers and EV manufacturers, communities, local governments, regional transportation planning associations, metros. There are quite a few interested in on this industry committee, and I've actually received several notes from potential candidates for the advisory committee, but we have not decided anything. This maybe will be one of the first decisions that we make as a coordinating committee. So we need to figure out who would be on the committee, what their role would be, which mainly is to provide feedback on the work that we're doing as the coordinating council on our strategic plans and reports and activities. We will have to figure out how often the group or groups should meet. Right now, everything seems to be virtual. Ultimately, we might want to have some in-person meetings as well. And we really want to make sure we have representation from all different types of stakeholders and with a balance based on geography and other things. So what I wanted to do today, just to get the conversation going, I think the closest thing to what we're trying to create comes at the national level. I mentioned the new Joint Office of Energy and Transportation that's leading things all transportation electrification at the federal level. And they are currently doing a call. They're currently setting up a national electric vehicle working group. And they officially established it last month and have developed a charter on what the working group will do and who it's made up of, and how they will be selected. So I'm going to share that with you as just one suggestion. I think it's the most closely aligned with what we're aiming to do. And if you look at the guidelines for the NEVI plan, there's a list of probably 36 different types of stakeholders that we're supposed to be doing outreach with. So, but we also want a group that is manageable size so we can get things done. So this is the National EVWG, EVWIG, I think it's called. And they are charged with working with the U.S. Department of Energy and Transportation in this new joint office. Right now, actually on Friday, they closed the nomination process. They had an open call for candidates, and people who wanted to be part of this national working group needed to supply their resume, letters of support, and identify which position they wanted to fill within that working group. And then now there's a selection team that's going to be going through the list of all the candidates that have been nominated and really try to make sure there's a balance of viewpoints and types of organizations. And so they're looking at the expertise, knowledge, experience, how well they can represent their stakeholder type. Of course, their availability and willingness to serve. Some are self-nominated, others were nominated from that might not even know they are nominated. And really, it's helpful if they've had experience working on committees or subcommittees or boards or other things. And then they're going to take this suggested list from this evaluation team and check it to make sure there's no conflicts of interest. and that it reflects a balance, and that this working group will help us meet our mission. We have a big challenge in front of us, and we want to make sure that the right people are on the working group to move things forward. And then they're going to take that list, narrowed down list, and reach out to those candidates to see if they are ready to serve. So there are 25 positions on the national EV working group, and I have listed here. It includes 6 that are federal government agencies, and then the rest are industry folks. And so EV manufacturers, medium and heavy duty, so freight electric vehicles, battery manufacturers, owners and operators and manufacturers of electric vehicle supply equipment, public utility industry, public utility regulator or association of public utilities. And as you know, in Washington, we have about 60 utilities of all different shapes and sizes. So at least at the federal level, they're looking for candidates that can represent all of those different types of utilities. Transportation, fueling, distribution industry, energy provider industry, automotive dealerships, for hire passenger transportation like Uber and Lyft, and there's more. Organization representing local governments, representing RTPOs and MPOs, representing, now at the federal level, they're looking for an organization representing all of the state DOTs and all of the state energy offices. So that would be someone from AASHTO for transportation, American state transportation officials, and energy officials. And so there are groups that oversee that, like NASIO and AASHTO. So that wouldn't apply to us, but also ITS systems and technologies. Technologies are moving so quickly, hard to keep track. We heard a lot during our NEVI planning that labor organizations need to be at the table. We also, since we're looking at not just light duty, but also medium heavy duty, we need to look at the trucking industry, tribal governments, and property development industry. So this is what they're doing at the federal level. And the way they're handling it is they're appointing people for 3 years, and they can be reappointed for up to 2 terms. And then if there's a vacancy, they'll go through this process to fill that seat. And also, I think they're planning to have varying levels of appointments. That way, not everyone's off the working group all at once, it's staggered. And then for the subcommittees are made up of representatives from the working group, and can also include people outside the working group if they're technical experts, consultants, or another point of view is needed to move something forward. So that is what's happening at the federal level. And I know in Washington state, there are examples of other models for subcommittees and working groups. And so I am asking for feedback from you on what sounds of interest to you, what suggestions you might have. Do you have ideas on how we might do this? Do you like what the federal government's doing, or do you want it expanded or changed? And most importantly, like in the last discussion session, we're looking for a small group of volunteers that can help determine how we're going to select candidates from each of the different industries within the EV industry, and everything from how many people should be on the council, how often to meet, and so on. So I'm going to end my slideshow. And I see Anna has her hand up. So Anna, hi.
Hi, I know I always have an opinion on these things. Thanks so much for pulling that example. That was really helpful to just like walk through what others are doing, particularly, a very relevant example. The thing that jumps out to me is one that's a very industry focused advisory group, and whereas we're especially good because we're going to be talking about things that are much more community focused just by the fact that we're working at the state level versus the federal level. We would really want to make sure that we're engaging a broader stakeholder group, including environmental justice advocates, whether that be we have a seat on there or we have some sort of process where we're working with Environmental Justice Council now that it's stood up. Another role I'd love to make sure we have, maybe two roles, is have a transit rep or somebody from the active mobility advocacy side, just because as we're looking at building out our EV charging infrastructure and really transitioning our vehicles to electric vehicles, we want to make sure that we're not doing it at the detriment of multimodal and also active mobility, so that we're not making infrastructure decisions that really would prohibit bike ped, et cetera. So I think we just need to have that representation in those views for folks who can just help us keep that in context and not get too car centric and run afoul of our other state priorities. And I'm happy to help this group in any way as we're having these discussions about how to stand it up.
Great, thank you so much, Anna. I appreciate your thoughts on that. And I agree that we do need community focused. They call this in the bill language, it's called an EV industry group, but I think we have the discretion to decide what that means. And of course, we can always have subcommittees as well. But what I heard is that you think we need to broaden to include community stakeholders, to make sure we're reaching disadvantaged communities, environmental justice advocates, and expand to include maybe WISTA, the transit agency, possibly the transit agency association, active mobility, including bicycles, pedestrians, and then commute trip reduction. So in addition to trying to get people in electric cars, we also want to get them out of electric cars to help meet our greenhouse gas goals and fuel reduction goals and air quality goals. And I also heard that you are volunteering to serve on our first working group, or no, our second. I guess the first one is deciding how we're going to conduct ourselves, but thank you for volunteering. Is there anyone else that would like to share your thoughts or volunteer? Michael.
Yeah, so I think thoughts are similar and a little bit different to what I heard from Anna. Kind of support the focus on the groups that you identified, Anna. And I think that list is a good starting point because of the scale and the scope and the focus. Not all those things are going to be right for Washington. And some of the roles, I think Utility Commission, State Energy Office are occupied by the council. So we'll just need to keep that in mind as we build out that group. So those are the things that come up for me. And then a suggestion that we might consider after hearing from other members of the council who've got and their thoughts about this is we might, depending on the number of additional volunteers we get, consider folding the two groups together. The one from the last, the one that I asked for and the one that you're asking for. So just a thought, but yeah. I'll thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael. So what I heard from you is that we'll have different needs at the state level than at the federal level. We already have a representative from the UTC on this coordinating council, but may need to look at other groups within Washington that need representation on the industry advisory group. Did anyone else notice any, through my presentation, any stakeholders that were missing besides the ones that Anna Leasing mentioned?
Hi, Tanya. I'm
Hi,
not
Patty.
sure if in the community if school districts would be considered in that section of the advisory group. But I know that they will both have to transition their school bus fleet, but also their white fleet.
Their what fleet?
Their white fleet, their motor pool.
Oh, okay. For the employees.
Motor pool vehicles can be used for other functions in the school district, but
Okay.
I work with, somewhat work with those that transport students.
Okay. So we do have you as a representative. I'm kind of thinking, I mean, we're supposed to be visionary here. I'm thinking that, you as OSPI might want to have a subgroup that you work with where you bring those comments and issues forward to the group. But I like that. And I see Ian, you have your hand up.
Well, I'm open for suggestions. So
go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, thank you, Tonya. I don't have additional stakeholders, but I do want to highlight something that we've experienced with SEEP, which is that there tends to be a disconnect between the programmatic policies and changes that we are seeking to enact. And we need to remember the overlap that, like, state agencies and state government has to comply with the changes, where applicable. And sometimes that disconnect isn't adequately addressed. And so something that I just kind of wanted to highlight for us. Tony, I think you actually switched the wrong way. You're muted, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Ian. And I know SEEP has a lot of experience in this area. Maybe you could just describe how SEEP is organized and how the working groups support the overarching SEEP activities. So that might help, because I didn't quite get what you meant. I think you're trying to be very politically correct. We are being recorded.
Yeah.
So if you can
so let me clarify. Yeah. So one of the things that SEEP is involved in is the Clean Buildings Standard. And there is a lot of really important work being done basically to ensure that Washington State complies with this law. Something that occasionally falls through the cracks is that state agencies are subject to that law. And so I need to comply in addition to being a regulatory entity working on this policy. Does that help? Okay. Yeah. So that's all I'm really trying to highlight. Like I said, I mean, like, we have agencies here, and SEEP, is happy to participate and help lead some of those conversations, but something that I wanted to highlight for us.
That sounds good. And just to make sure that the working group industry EV group is supporting and in alignment with the coordinating council, I think maybe it should be chaired by someone on this coordinating council, Michael Furs, myself, or another member, just to make sure that we're connected and working on the same vision and goals. Thank you for your feedback on that. Are you volunteering to help on this topic?
Yeah, I would be
Okay.
happy to.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ian. And Dustin, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to flag, there's a comment in the chat about ports being involved. From Nicola Graham says that ports would love to be involved, help inform the heavy duty charging piece with drayage trucks and supply chain. So I just wanted to flag that for inclusion on that list.
Thank you, Dustin. Thank you for keeping an eye on that chat. I agree. I mean, this group is looking at not just, we're looking at all areas of transportation, electrification, and ports is an area where we could probably make some significant greenhouse gas reductions. And ports are often located in areas where there are disadvantaged communities with poor air quality. And so the ports have actually been, the Port Association has been a great partner over the last years. And we've presented to the ports, Commerce and WSDOT and Ecology have presented on our programs with the ports, and I agree that they're an important stakeholder. So we'll take that under consideration. Anybody else? Volunteers? And this is something, you know, this is all new. We're trying to form as a council while at the same time creating another group. So there are a lot of moving parts, and I don't anticipate that we'll have the actual EV industry group up and running immediately because we need to work through some of these issues. So be patient if you're listening in and you have sent a note to Commerce or WSDOT saying you want to be on the EV Advisory Council. We know that, and we'll make sure to check the Commerce webpage for information on the EV advisory group. I think we can conclude this section, and I'm going to pause, like Michael's really good at doing, and see if anyone else has any closing thoughts on this. Okay, well, with that, I think we have some direction. We have some volunteers. I've got Anna and Ian and myself. I'll be working on this, and I do like the idea of combining this with the organizational structure and decision-making process, because we need to work hand in glove between these two groups. And I imagine that there will be subcommittees working on specific topics. I know that the utilities have expressed an interest, and we want utilities, not just the investor-owned utilities, and we have a representative from the WUTC, but also the munis and the public utility districts around the state. And so maybe that's someone from representative from the PUD association or something. So ours will be different than the federal level, and more inclusive, I think, and more diverse. That's our goal: diversity and inclusion.
Well,
okay, I'm going to pass it back to you, Michael. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for walking us through that. Appreciate the conversation and the way that it's flowed. Jason, I want to bring back up something that you mentioned earlier, and kind of thinking about the technical work that's ahead of us. And there's kind of a question, maybe a comment or suggestion around thinking about bringing in additional resources to help with that work, and in the form of consultants to support the council. I wanted to see if you've got more behind your thinking there, or more that you wanted to share about what you would do. What comes up for me is in parallel with something I heard Courtney say, kind of like where are we? There's a lot of agencies here. Each one of us and others that are not represented by the council have done significant amounts of transportation electrification plans or analysis. And a thought that I've got would be just to start by putting all those pieces on the table, and having a consultant kind of come in and help synthesize, look for gaps in the modeling, data analysis, kind of policy analysis that we have already, along with helping build out what Jim and the WSU Energy folks have done on community outreach. So that's a lot of what consultants could do for us that I've been thinking about. Is there more, Jason, on your mind when you thought about the role that consultants might play, before I open it up to other folks and needs that they see?
I think you captured one of the key areas, which is, kind of a quasi white paper review of what's already existing with the different agencies, and where there might be some gaps. Some of the other areas are, if there is an identified major project or gap that would need a consultant to lead on, that's more of a heavy lift. And then potentially looking at some of, if we can just even look at our own engagement process and plan to ensure that, we're kind of meeting the metrics that we should be in that. Those were the general areas that I was thinking.
Great, that makes a lot of sense to me. Other thoughts that folks on the council want to share, maybe seconding those ideas, placing emphasis or adding something new about what we might use a consultant for?
Yeah, hi.
Yeah.
I think that consultants can play a very important role, especially as we're diving into something that is so new and ever changing. In Oregon DOT hired consultants to do a TINA study, a transportation, basically a gap analysis and forecasting of where they need to get to reach goals. And so for the report or the strategy that we need to submit by December 2023, I think it might be great to have a consultant working on that document and helping us think big and have a big vision and figure out how we're going to meet that goal. And in Oregon, through a competitive bidding process, they hired RMI and a few other consultants that came together as a team, and they did all kinds of helpful forecasting. And I think that they might have access to some excellent tools and resources that we might not have individually. So I recommend on those really big strategy that we consider having a consultant help guide us.
Great, thanks for that, Tonya. So I think I heard for our December 2023 deliverable of the transportation electrification strategy document, considering consultants to help with that work. That seems reasonable to me. I'm curious if other members of the council like that idea. Yeah, Jason, I see you.
I think that sounds like a good idea moving forward.
Great, thanks for that. I mentioned in my opening remarks the 2021 State Energy Strategy, which was we pursued different consultants who were equally helpful in bringing resources to help complete that document. So that to me seems like a reasonable thing for us to consider. And I do believe that in fiscal note that was submitted and funded, we contemplated a consultant to do some of the work that folks are describing. Can folks think of anything else right now that would benefit from support of a consultant? Anything you want to see that we haven't talked about?
Michael, would it be helpful if I put the slide back up of the council's responsibilities while we're talking about this?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, Michael, I'll just say that I think that, there's going to be so much work to do to develop this strategy for making sure we're ready for 100% new cars being zero emission vehicles by 2030. I feel like that is going to set up a really good roadmap for what needs to get done. And then a bunch of work will be spun out from that, in addition to all the work that all the agencies are already undertaking on transportation electrification. So yeah. I'm not too worried about having a lack of work for consultants.
Yeah, I'm not either. I'm just curious about any particular perspective that folks want to bring in as we think about how best to utilize them. So appreciate those thoughts. So thanks for pulling up the document, Stephen. I see your hand, Jason.
And I promise to stop doing this. So just to, I guess, expand a little bit more in terms of the engagement or outreach. One of the things, if possible, it would be, I think, beneficial to have a third party or a group that, whether it's to the community or industry, that can have those discussions and maybe get information that those organizations or groups may feel uncomfortable giving to a regulator, so we can get maybe a little bit more raw but real-time information from some of the needs, some of the concerns, and whatnot. So that's just following up on previous comment. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. And don't stop. Keep bringing your ideas forward, please. Thank you. So I think we've talked about a handful of these bullet points, Stephen, at least in the second section. We mentioned the developing the strategy. We talked about the work that agencies are currently doing. Didn't talk about coordinating grant funding criteria, but that's probably a subset of the former. And then I just heard Jason kind of provide more expansive thoughts around outreach. I think the connection with the EJ Council, which was mentioned earlier, we'll need to make sure that happens, along with a range of other stakeholders. So thanks for sharing that. I think we've done a good job covering it. The next item that we've got is scheduling, and then if we can, maybe getting some topics to sort through at the next meeting. The proposal that I want to put forward, recognizing that it's summertime, is that my sense is that we'll need to meet more frequently as we get ourselves formed, and can kind of build some momentum that will carry us through the end of the calendar year into the long legislative session. So my proposal would be that we have monthly meetings through the fall with the kind of action item in October or earlier if necessary, that we would allow us to reevaluate the timing and frequency of our meetings before the next legislative session. So just want to ask for thoughts. Maybe I want to ask for concerns first. If folks have concerns about meeting each month between now and October once. Are there concerns that folks have about that? Thanks, Jason. I see you shaking your head. No. Okay. And then I would hope, but don't know, that there are no concerns that we would try that out for the period through October. And then we would reevaluate at that point. So just want to create some space and see if anybody has concerns about that.
I think it's helpful to remind you all that if you're not able to attend a meeting because of vacation or a conflict with a very important other activity, then you may send a representative from your agency.
Thanks for that reminder, Tonya. It's a good point. Okay, so we'll proceed with that. And Stephen Hershkowitz, who was instrumental in setting up this meeting, will reach out to council members and we'll go about scheduling with folks between now and October. We'll schedule through October. We'll reach out before then. And a couple of council members indicated there may be changes in representation, so please connect us with the right person as soon as they are on board so that we can move forward from there. My sense is that there are already a couple of topics that we want to have on the next agenda for an August meeting. And so I wanted to put those forward as a test and see if there's feedback, modifications, changes that you all want to suggest. I think the first thing would be an update on the NEVI plan. I'm assuming there may not be a lot of updates other than we submitted on August 1st, but that to me would be the starting place. The second thing would be a report out for the council on the from the different work groups that we've mentioned. So report out on governance, report out on advisory committee, report out on other committees or subcommittees or work groups that we want to establish, and then we would want to take action on those items. And to me, that would be a pretty robust amount of work for us to move forward in August and then set ourselves up for longer term success. But I wanted to pause there and see if there are clarifying questions or additions that folks wanted to make to our the proposed agenda for the August IVEC meeting. Thanks, Jason. I see you.
This is probably just more for context or clarity, but on the report outs regarding the government's advisory and other committees, if we know a scope of work for any follow-up on those committees, maybe if we could also have any timeline or milestones that are needed in order to meet our report deadlines, that might be helpful as well.
Yeah, that would be. Thanks, Jason. What else do folks want to add to the discussion for August? Tonya?
Yes, well, it's important that we continue to engage with our stakeholders. And so I would like to suggest that we provide information like a week in advance on the Commerce website with the agenda and meeting call-in details. It sounds like we have quite a few people listening in today, And I want to make sure that they have a roadmap of where we're going. And I remember back during legislative session, Senator Elias really wanted to see a one-stop shopping location where people could find out about all these different grant opportunities and coordination efforts. So, it's going to take us some time before we're totally formed and normed and operating at full capacity. But I think we should really think about making sure we continue to invite the public and perhaps even have a public comment period at the end of meetings, or continue to take feedback via chat. But we want to make sure that we're operating in a transparent way, so it's clear to the general public and our elected officials what we're doing, how we're doing it, and that we provide notice about it.
Thanks for that, Tonya. I see your hand, Anna.
Yeah, thanks. Just wanted to second Tonia's comments. I think it'd be really helpful for future meetings. I mean, there's so much work to be done in standing up the council. I don't expect it to be within the next couple of meetings, but something that would be ideal for like ongoing once the council's kind of set up is having just like a running list of the various EV programs and grant funding opportunities. And I don't know, we probably won't have time to go through, like give a status update every meeting, but if there was at least like one slide or two slides each meeting that we could, post up on the website for folks to reference later of just like, here's where we are, like any like major deadlines or milestones coming up for the programs. And like, as part of the EV Council, we just take it as like upon ourselves to just check in with each of the agencies and like, where are we at on this rulemaking? Where are you at on like application deadlines for that grant opportunity, et cetera? And so it's just housed in a kind of an ongoing updated list that people can access as part of the meeting materials. That would be super helpful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think transparency and accountability go hand in hand. And so ways to make that easy and accessible for folks in the meeting and beyond makes a lot of sense to me. So thanks for those comments. What else?
I just want to take this opportunity to thank Commerce for getting a website stood up so quickly for this Interagency EV Coordinating Council, where the public can find information and be able to have a link where they can listen in, and providing information about the Coordinating Council, and developing the agenda for today. And most of all, for helping pass the NEVI plan. So my thanks to Commerce for really stepping up with the staffing for this program, and a special thanks to Stephen Hershkowitz for doing all the background work.
Thanks so
Tonya.
Thanks for those kind words. It's been great to partner with you. I know it's an ongoing partnership that we've had with WashDOT that's built on the work of others, but it's great to continue it forward with you. Similarly, I think we've come to the end of our agenda, and I want to thank everyone for their engagement today, whether that's the council members. Thanks so much for being here. Thank you for approving the plan. Thanks for everyone again for all the work that went into getting us here, whether that predates legislative session, influencing the legislation that has brought us here, or the work and the comments on the NEVI plan itself. We will need that much help and more as we go forward to do what Chair Fye called a huge challenge. And I look forward to stepping into that challenge with you all. It is your collection of voices that will help us untangle the knots and move forward in a way that everyone in Washington benefits, especially those who have traditionally not benefited from these sorts of policies and investments. Have a great day, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.